On Thursday, I gathered the materials for building my sukkah, adjoining the back wall of my house. It was a beautiful afternoon, warm, sunny, and perfect for outdoor work. Today, of course, it has poured with rain, and I feared for my little sukkah, which, like the ship in which Jonah escaped to Tarshish, threatened to break up. Mercifully, it has survived the tempest so far, and I can see it from my study window, its walls and roof interleaved and covered with laurel branches, a few apples and bunches of sea lavender hanging from the trellis roof. I think that many of us who have celebrated Sukkot over the years are familiar with the mitzvot, the commandments that are associated with the festival of Sukkot. Building a sukkah according to the rules of the Mishnah and Talmud, 3 walls, a roof which provides more shade than sun, but through which you can see the stars on a clear night, strong enough to withstand a rough wind, but not a permanent structure, nor a lean-to against the wall of a house or another building. Mine is a little hut, I hope fully kosher, blending in with the trees and plants of the garden. Then there is the second mitzvah, already mandated in Leviticus 23, our Torah reading for tomorrow morning, the first day of Sukkot. You shall take the product of hadar trees, branches of palm trees, the date palm, which is what this is, boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook. The fruit from the hadar trees eventually became the etrog, a citron with a fragrance that is heavenly, and the boughs of leafy trees became myrtle with their small eye-shaped leaves growing closely together. These are the 4 species which we've just waved in our service this evening, and which we'll wave tomorrow again during the singing of the Hallel. Perhaps because they sound a little like rain falling, their waving was originally a ritual requesting rain over the winter months. I'm not sure the rain needed any sort of ritual for today. These 4 species gave rise to many different interpretations, each of the plants compared to a part of the human anatomy or likened to different kinds of individuals, and the waving a way of invoking God's presence over the world. But there is also a third mitzvah associated with the celebration of Sukkot, which we often forget, but which can be found in that same passage in Leviticus. U'semachtem lifnei Adonai Elohechem shivat yamim. You shall rejoice before the Eternal One your God for 7 days. I think it was Yeshayahu Leibovitz, scientist, philosopher, and intellectual, and once termed the conscience of Israel, who died in 1994, who once said that the mitzvah of rejoicing on Sukkot is a religious act that is prior to any set of human needs or values. In other words, however we may be feeling personally at this precise moment of religious celebration, we must put those feelings to one side in favor of God's demands. We become, he said, an instrument for the realization of an end which transcends human beings. We serve God lishma, not out of our own needs and desires, for that would subordinate God to human values, but because God is worthy of praise. This approach to the mitzvah of rejoicing before God, usmachtem lifnei Adonai, may certainly be at odds with how we are feeling at the moment, in the midst of the pandemic's second wave and so much else in the world that seems so chaotic and disorganized. Over the past few months, we have often drawn a parallel between the dramatic changes we have had to make to our own form of worship and the way the early generations of rabbis had to adapt following the destruction of the temple and the elimination of the whole cult of sacrificial worship that took place there. The Talmud actually asks this very question: how is one to rejoice after the tragedy of the destruction of the temple? Drawing from a verse in Psalms, it suggests that we must rejoice with wine that gladdens the heart, quoting Psalm 104. This will allow us to rejoice at our festivals. I'm not sure whether the rabbis suggested this tongue-in-cheek, knowing the effects of detachment and confusion that alcohol can have at times of stress and strain. But as my colleague Rabbi Sylvia Rothschild points out, there is no mitzvah to drink wine on Sukkot, as there is on Purim and Pesach. And Simcha often requires a community, a group, a family for real joy and rejoicing to take place. If we listen carefully to that Torah reading for tomorrow, we see that this verb, usamachtem, you shall rejoice before the Eternal One your God, is formulated not in the singular, but in the plural. You, the community, will rejoice before God. Our joy is undoubtedly tempered as we celebrate our festivals with so few people in the sanctuary and on these virtual platforms of YouTube and Zoom. But I hope that even if you do not have the fragrance of an etrog or cannot perform the mitzvah of waving the lulav, even if you haven't managed yet to build your sukkah, you can take a few moments over the next week of this festival to be outside, to rejoice as you watch the rain fall on the grass and the gentle turning of the leaves to their rich autumn colors, as you feel the wind on your face and enjoy the fruits of your labors. This too must become our form of rejoicing, and may we know and understand that we can come together as a community, reaching across the cybersphere of space to celebrate this festival of Sukkot, together, setting aside our own temporary needs and desires to rejoice before the Eternal One, our God. Kein Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will, and let us say, Amen.